Any questions or comments? Yes.
I guess in the vein of intuition and Musubi, it's interesting to see. I was thinking about it on Saturday and was going to say something. I think if you can see on your technique in the videos, you're always moving in proportion with na or uke. And I don't see, every once in a while I see it on the mat with other people, but it's very rare to see that harmonization. Far away, close, in the technique, after the technique, between techniques. And I'm wondering whether those two skills are, I don't know whether the same thing, but...
Yeah, I would say, yeah, they are very much related. There's a lot of overlap. So in the sense that when we talked about Musubi, I had asked you to begin with a material blending, but to understand that it is ultimately about an immaterial, intangible communion that must happen. And so, even to elaborate a little bit on that, spiritually, the spirit has no materiality. This thing we call nature, all that force that stands in between, before and after the tree and the leaf and the acorn, this divine we try to describe in negative terms, the inner aspects of ourself that we feel are the most real, but I cannot point to, I cannot touch, I cannot surgically remove or add to my being. Those invisible gravitational forces that make up the loves in our lives, all of that is beyond our touch. And it would be no, we can accept all that, but somehow when it comes time to fighting, we only think in terms of the punch. We don't think in terms of the being and all those invisible things. But you have to, because speed of life is faster than touch. Speed of life is faster than a tangible sensing of a stimuli and then a responding of my own stimuli. And the idea, like Blauer, a guy, he has an idea. It's such pseudo snake oil science where he says, well, yeah, that's true. So what we need to do is use a primitive reflex, and that's going to make us fast enough. And it's all bullshit, and I have written on that. We are not the first culture to discover the flinch response. Other societies, other cultures throughout history clearly understood it, but they rejected it. They rejected it because it's not tactically viable in the end. And they went for this other thing. This other thing that it is true. So if I have a love affair and I have it existing only at the level of materiality, you're not going to feel loved, nor will your partner. In fact, we define those love affairs that are only material, right? We say they're not. They're not love affairs. They're one-night stands. You're just using the person. They're just using you. So, in a love affair, it is about this immaterial connection. that allows you to know or to know without it being told to you of what your partner needs, wants. You're able to elicit the proper response outside of its matter and outside of its clearly stated form. Well, what is that? Well, human beings have things like intention, ideas, wants, fears. Does a person that is attacking you stop having those things? No, they have those things too. So why can't I intuit? You might want to say, well, you can intuit when you learn more about that person in a combat situation. It's so quick, you don't have time to intuit. And that seems to make sense only when you look at long, old relationships. Yes, there might be some old couples who can intuit, but the majority of them could give a shit what the other person is thinking, right? They're done intuiting. They can't intuit. There's no need for it. And that tells me that duration alone is not it. Just in the same way, you will meet that special person and you'll utter some variation on the phrase, I feel like I've known you all my life. Why can you feel that way right off the bat? Well, again, whatever the reason might be, it still says that I can do it right immediately. I don't need a lifetime to be able to sense and intuit from this unsaid immaterial information what to do, what should be done. And I think that's very important because when it comes time to union or Musubi or communion with the divine, which is immaterial and silent. If I don't posit the human capacity for that communion in the face of that silence and immaterial nature, then I don't have any relationship with the divine. I don't have any spiritual maturity. I don't. Because you can take that one. If I take that one away, then of course my own spirit, where is it? What is it? It's all those things we point to beyond our matter, beyond our intellect, beyond our words. Well, it too, you cannot surgically remove it nor put it in, and it is not going to write it all out for you. Yet you must find a way of relating to it. You must find a way of knowing its wants, its needs, its fears, its intentions. So communication, right, which is a kind of musubi and the way that I'm using it, communication is possible. Human beings have the capacity to communicate with immaterial, unsaid things. And that doesn't change whether the person is attacking me, dancing with me, making love to me, or arguing with me. And once I allow for that possibility, then, well, what gets in the way of that? Well, what we always say, you are not present. What do we mean by that? You are somewhere else, doing something else, being something else, such that the information that is contained therein, you are not able to sense it. That's how we define presence. It's an inverse or a negative understanding. Presence is not positively defined. It is negatively defined, meaning, how do I know when I'm present? When you are able to sense all the information that is there. How do I know when I'm not present? When there's information that is there, but you weren't able to sense it. Do you understand? So we refer to that in Buddha as centeredness, right? We could even understand it when we talk about mushin, because mushin is, or no mind, is the capacity to not be pulled by any one thing away from the totality of information that is there. So when I'm in the fight, if my mind is captured by one thing, again, negatively understanding that, that means I do not have the totality. I'm missing part of the message. When I have the totality of the message, it means I'm not pulled by any one thing. And when I'm not pulled by any one thing, and I have the totality of the message, I have mushin. Presence, centeredness. So if you look at your jiwaza, and every time it's not fluid, it's not natural, it's forced. You're pulling, pushing, you're early, you're late. You will always find that you're stuck on one thing. And you will always find then, simultaneously, that you're not getting the whole of the message. And then you will find that you cannot blend with that person, because getting the whole of the message is itself Musubi at that immaterial level. So I don't have Musubi at that immaterial level. What are the odds of me having Musubi at a material level? It could happen, but if it did, it's what? Coincidence. It's just the luck. Your unpresent, attached, fear-driven mind, whatever the reason why you lost Mushin, caused a particular response to Tenshinage, and they happened to walk into Tenshinage, and it worked fine. But it's just coincidence. Then it happens. Those things happen in nature. But that's not what Buddha is after. So when we use the phrase in English, intuition, yeah, we're talking about being able to understand, comprehend, decide a certain course of action upon what at first glance appears to be only part of the information. And at first glance, when someone's attacking you, the strike, the actual physical strike, is only part of the information. So it might look like, as you saw, I'm moving before the strike comes. Yes, because I'm already in communion with them. They've already done a lot of things. They have shifted their weight. They have inhaled. They have exhaled. Their glance has focused in a certain direction. And every one of those things, for example, means that something else is not going to happen. Do you get that? And so you can move into certain areas knowing, because of how you shifted your weight, your inhalation pattern, just for example, where you looked prior to, odds are that I can move here. And you're not going to be able to do anything about it. When you can do that, the techniques become effortless. And you might want to say, now my Aikido is effective. No, your Aikido was that immaterial Musubi. You get it? It's not now. Now I can do Ikkyo. That's a very crude understanding of the art. right? So now once he grabs my wrist, I could do Ikkyo. Ikkyo started way long time ago. If you wait to now when he grabs my wrist, I can do Ikkyo. You will not do Ikkyo. You will not do Ikkyo unless what? You're coincidental, or the two things we always, right? You're stronger and you're faster than that person. Okay. But if you're doing it coincidentally and you're doing it because you're stronger or you're faster than that person, is that Aikido? No, it's not. And if Ikkyo is an Aikido technique, are you really doing Ikkyo? No, you're not. You're doing some arm bar. Do you understand? So all your training has to lead to this understanding of Musubi. Whether it's martial, you're here for martial reasons, or whether you're here for spiritual reasons. You cannot have your understanding of the art or of its key concepts like Musubi limited by any kind of material worldview. It must go beyond that. And the examples I gave you are to encourage you. It's not such a strange concept. We have immaterial reading of things, of information, of immaterial information all the time. In fact, most of the time. Most of the ways that we're living are not based upon these intellectual, verbal, material bits of information. Right? It's just the economy is driven by that. And so we all are culture to hurry up and go to school to produce material, intellectual things so that we can sell them. But most of your life is not at all geared on those. You couldn't even live if that is the way that you live. Not one bit. You're looking at the problem of, right? It's the problem of spontaneity, isn't it? Right? It's the problem of Takemusu Aiki. The spontaneous application of wisdom assumes that you have all the information. And that assumes that you are able to receive all of the information. That, to me, that is the warrior's interest in Zen, was the effect that attachment to any one thing, any one piece of information, has upon wisdom, has upon the choosing of right thought, right speech, right action. For the warrior, right action. The warrior is interested in Buddhism's mind theory because it made sense. My capacity to observe the totality is hindered by my attachment to this one thing, or that two things, or this thing, or that thing. And that causes my martial performance to degenerate, which causes my statistical probability for surviving this to go way down. We still see it today. In law enforcement, that's the buzzword, is mindfulness. Because not being mindful, not being present, getting stuck on any one thing, still gets people killed. And it still ruins relationships. So I don't think we're talking about some, magic. It's not like the Force of Star Wars, which is why I give you those everyday things, everyday examples of where we relate to immaterial things all the time. We value them all the time. We prioritize them all the time. So it's not like the Force, it's not a magic I'm advocating here. But you must be motivated to move beyond your material limitations. To other people, it will look like you knew, right? In a paranormal way, but they're just not there. They're not operating there. You don't know in that way. That's why it looks odd to them or fake to them. The problem of martial practicality, just jumping ahead, is not one of technique. It is one of this, to know in this way. Once you can know in this way, you don't need to know techniques. You're not restricted by form or style. Kind of like that pianist I told you. They gave her 4 notes and she just goes off. And don't think for a second that she had all that written out in her head. That no, she got a little bit of it, then started playing, and now she is responding to what she's listening to herself play. And again, the same way, if you were to ask, can you do it again? She's like, no, I can't do it again, right? Well, she's in the moment, she's present. But probably if you film her and she's watching it and she goes back, she goes, well, this I can see that this would make me do that and that would make me do that. But she's able to put out the product, that melody, in a spontaneous way without having the music in front of her and the directions and all that kind of stuff. That is no different than Takemusu Aiki. That is the same thing as Jiwaza. Free. You're free. Attachment is always a kind of enslavement, right? And so Mushin is always going to be a kind of ji, a kind of freedom. So if you sum up kind of this idea, it's not a strange thing, it's not a magic thing, it's not a superstition thing, it's not even anti-scientific. It might be anti-scientistic, but it's not anti-scientific. And I need it to understand my art. I cannot do my art without this capacity to have communion at that early point with anyone, anything, anytime. It's not an alternative to martial training. It is the heart of martial training. The hippie Aikidoka that come to the art with this very adolescent view of non-resistance and the art of peace. That adolescent view, very philosophically immature view, like to contrast this. Okay, you can either do martial arts where you're going to kick the crap out of someone, or you can do this Musubi. But that's how dabblers always talk. They know the words, but they don't have the understanding, and so they're like kids. They're like kids. When kids hear mommy and daddy talking and they're playing their little doll games, they use the words, but they have no concept of how that works. And so you get these very strange ideas that
I can either be Musubi, I can either have Musubi, or I can have martiality, and that's not true. In fact, I'm saying the exact opposite. You cannot have martiality without Musubi, and any Musubi that cannot exist under a martially intense situation is not Musubi.
It's likely coincidence, by which we mean it's inside our ego attachment. So it's not Musubi. So let that motivate you. Yes, learn your forms, but no, you're supposed to get beyond form,
not stuck in form. So take the technique we had.
We just did one slight modification, the kaiten nage. Don't go for the arm. And it's explained to you that you don't have the arm like in katata dori, and the hip is more effective. It is way more effective. If you ever watch me when I'm not out to teach you guys anything, and I'm just doing my kaiten nage, I always bring that arm right into the hip. So I'm going to push the hip with their arm. You see how the hip is a direct manipulation of what needs to be manipulated. The arm is an indirect manipulation. So the arm indirect manipulations allow you to they work like a pulley, in the sense that you won't require as much strength to affect whatever it is you want to affect, but you'll have a delay and you'll have slack, all that kind of stuff. So in this case, I make the hip very light. How? How is the hip made very light? By bringing the head around. There ain't nothing on the hip. So when you were training in between, you saw he's spinning around on you because you're not pushing it, but that tells you how light the hip is now. You see? So you bring the head around, and that part is the same in Kihon Waza and in the technique we did tonight, the Oyo Waza. Variation, right? Counter and variation. But yet, even though everyone was instructed, do the hip, explain the benefit of the hip, the technique doesn't make it any worse. How many people went for the arm? You went for the arm because you're trapped in form. You're trapped in form. And that is always one of the downsides of any system of learning. It doesn't change whether it's Buddhism, Zen, or Budo. You need form, but you must go beyond form. So every art is a kind of poison. But like medicines, right? You take enough, it'll work. You take too much, it starts to kill you. It's that kind of poison. So no different then. How do I not take too much?
You have to always understand, I am learning a form to go beyond a form.
I am learning Aikido to not have Aikido. And it's not until then that you do have Aikido. Because Aikido as form is not Aikido. So every single Aikidoka must chase after that deconstruction of form. Yes, go after form, but you must also chase after a deconstruction of form
and a reconciliation of form and non-form.
Otherwise, you don't have a practice. You just have an exercise.
Is this the problem of Shu-Ha-Ri?
Yes, it's the Shu-Ha-Ri. Again, you see, that is what the classic warriors understood of what makes things practical. Not technique, but mind capacity. Anyone who fights for real, who really does, and like they've mastered it.
They know the real problem is spontaneity. The real problem is form. The real problem is the riddle of form and non-form. That causes hesitation, mismatched tactical application, poor strategy.
But a lot of people don't fight for real. Or a lot of people don't fight long enough to realize that's what's happening. You know, when life's on the line and you mess up, you make the wrong tactical decision, you better believe your mind starts spinning like crazy on why you made that wrong tactical decision. It does not go like you might see in a sport application. It does not go to what you should have chosen instead. It's very concerned with why did you choose so wrongly. Not just what should I have chosen instead. You become very preoccupied with that because the consequences are just operating at that level, the level of nightmares. Right? You'll wake up with sweats and dreams, and where you survived, but you knew it was luck, and so in the dreams you don't survive. Are you done? So the ancient warrior was more like, what's stopping me from using the information that I have, right, in a spontaneous live situation? And it's a problem of mind, not a problem of technique. So to be obsessed with technique or to limit myself technique is really to depart from the ancient master. And that just seems crazy. Who are we? Who are we to say, no. This mind stuff can totally be solved if you just learn a practical art. So we have articles on Shu-Ha-Ri on the website. Go back and read them, just even to get an idea of what we're talking about here. We also have the Takuan. His book is in the library there, so check it out. It's available on audiobook. That one's a little dense, though. I don't recommend an audiobook for the unfettered mind. But get the book. It's a Penguin classic. It's like $5 or $4 like that. And chapter 1 will get you into the game. Anything else? Follow-ups or any technique? Go ahead.
This is back to the point of the story of the swordman and the student. The student goes to the teacher, wants to learn the sword techniques, and for the next 2 or 3 years, the teacher just sneaks up behind him and beats the shit out of him. And finally, he asks, are you going to teach me any techniques? And the teacher goes, well, you already have it all. You don't need any.
Yeah, that's the point of the story. But obviously, you need to have Shu. You have to start with Shu. You cannot not start with Shu. I think maybe people more in the know can using a different language would be able to, and I wish they would, comment on the problem that Bruce Lee had when he understood this problem, when he exposed himself to writers like Takuan and other Zen thinkers, and he saw the problem of form in spontaneity, in spontaneous application. And so, okay, but what do I teach you now? You see, if my problem is form, and I make my art about freeing you from form, well, what do I start with, though? And I think those early people that were coming after him, that's why you started seeing inclusion from other arts, because you have to start somewhere. And even in Buddhism, you see that. You'll have a lot of people who will grasp this concept intellectually of Mushin, and then they start, I'm not attached to nothing, right? Except they don't see you're attached to non-attachment. And they might eventually venture into a actual Zen temple, and they cannot fathom how many rules and how much confinement that goes on there, and how everything is ritualized, and the schedule is all set, and everything has a way of doing it and a way it's not to be done. And it's shocking to them, right? And to them seems not of Zen, but it's because they have not truly reconciled form. So when if I'm in Jiwaza, if you think that Takemusu Aiki is never doing Ikkyo, Nikkyo, Sankyo, Yonkyo, but always making up something that's never been created before, then you are attached to non-attachment. You are attached to the idea of non-form. And that is no better than to be attached to form. It is still as blinding. It is still as unaware. It's exactly the same spiritually. And so then, okay, inversely, what does that mean? You know what it means? It means that when I have truly reconciled form and non-form, when I'm at thee, then my Kihon Waza is as much Jiwaza as my Jiwaza it can be Kihon Waza. So if I'm doing my technique and I've picked my Ikkyo in advance and it's working because it's coincidence, that would be attachment to form. But if I go and I say, whoops, don't do Ikkyo, that's a form technique, do something else, that's attachment to non-form. But if I blend with the person that's coming in and I have communion with them, and they fall into what some observer is going to look at and go, that's Ikkyo, that would be the reconciliation of form and non-form. That is what that rejection of form for an attachment to non-form is what I would call a part of that adolescent understanding. The rebel without a cause is what that is. That's why I call it adolescent, because you're like a teenager who just, I'm going to do the opposite, and not realizing the exact opposite is exactly the same. Heads and tails, it's still a quarter. That kind of thing. So when I'm asking you to get beyond form, it's not to reject form. That's not what we mean. Well, hence the phrase, a reconciliation of form and non-form. You're probably going, what the hell does that mean? Well, I think you can at least deduce it doesn't mean to reject form. We could have said that, and we didn't say that. And it would be a total misunderstanding of these. And if you're going out here and you're doing Jiwaza and you're trying as hard to not do Ikkyo as if you were at the beginning of your so-called practice, to do Ikkyo, you would be as much unnatural, right, in your Jiwaza. Your technique would be as much forced as it would be or wouldn't be whether you were doing Ikkyo, didn't know Ikkyo or whatever. So form is not something in the end I have to reject all outright. It is something I have to reconcile. But I cannot be satisfied with form, nor can I be satisfied with non-form. In that sense, then, I can start with form. I just can't end with form. And you'll see lately with this week, I've been telling you, stop doing the technique. Feel the technique. Feel what the person needs to have done. That is, there's a communion between my Jiyu and my Kihon. Stop operating, and this is where my arm goes on Tenshi Nage. Why? Why? It does when you're trying to learn the concepts or the architecture at an abstract level, but in application, if my uke is not there for that, then I have to do what they're requiring me to do. So in the video you saw all those different variations, right? There was one variation I had never done before. I looked at it and go, oh, that's a pretty neat. The one where I was on one side and stepped immediately to the other side was really pretty cool, I thought. I've never done it before. But that's where they were going. It was just too much energy, and to go back and all that would make it unmartial. So let me go to the other side. If they push it on one side, probably not push it on the other side, right? So you were trying to learn, I got to get stronger, I got to learn commitment, I got to learn sacrifice, I got to learn to navigate myself and my life into daily practice, which seems, huge. It's overwhelming, isn't it? Okay, even when you get that, you have not even started. Because the reconciliation of form and non-form is what we people on the way call. That's what we're referring to when we say it takes a lifetime. Showing up and daily practice and commitment, that doesn't take a lifetime. That happens in a snap. You might take a lifetime, but it does not take that. So, let's put this in perspective. Get yourself where it needs to be, where you need to be. Get yourself at the foot of the mountain. Some of us are in the neighboring city, not at the foot of Mount Fuji. Some of us are on the Shinkansen going by and looking at Mount Fuji out the window. You have to get at the foot, and this is the mountain. Shu-Ha-Ri. Form, deconstruction of form, reconciliation of form and non-form. There's no art outside of that. You'll get some benefits, but that is the art.